Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. Today I got a weird one for you, but it's a really special one. It's a movie I recently saw, and it blew my mind. And you probably haven't heard of it because it's not a message they want anyone in the world to hear right now. If that's not enticing, hang in there. Those of you coming in for the truth of other things, well, this one's a real easy one. This is a movie made in 1941. Stars Gary Cooper and Barbara Stanwyck, just to name a few. And this is about a movement that's fictionally started in the United States of America by one man due to a weird accident. And it just goes from there. Now, I'm going to read you 3 scenes from this film, but we're going to talk about it up to that point. Not sure we're going to do a complete blow by blow as we do with the other movie reviews. We're going to be a little more coarse with the reviews, but we will go from start to finish. I believe this movie is completely free on Amazon Prime, and the movie's called Meet John Doe, as the title of the episode indicates, right? But it's based on a story by Richard Connell and Robert Presnell. It's an old Warner Brothers movie. But this movie starts off with an interesting mechanism. A newspaper has been recently acquired, and the camera pushes into this old newspaper, and it feels to me like New York City, but I'm not sure they ever really say it's New York City. Can't remember. But it's hustling and bustling in this newspaper, and there's a transition going on. At just the second the movie starts, so it's high velocity. If you don't know Gary Cooper, I will say that you're going to be treated to one of the best thespians you've ever seen on camera, and Barbara Stanwyck is just, go look her up. You should watch every Barbara Stanwyck movie ever made. She is just ridiculous, amazing. She's one of the most versatile actresses. I believe she's in Stella, the original Stella. But she's getting fired. She plays a character named Anne. And this old guy named Connell, and they're just liquidating like crazy. And she's some reporter in the newspaper, and she is finding out that she has been let go, but she's got to finish the day. And you get a sense she's brilliant, like she's really hip to everything that's going on and understands the newspaper at the deepest level. And she understands the community that reads newspapers at the deepest level. But she's still kind of a budding employee, right? So she's found out that she's been laid off, and so she's kind of trying to plead with the Connell guy, and he just won't have it. And she's trying to pitch something cool, and he just won't have anything to do with it. So she goes back to her desk. She's supposed to knock out a last article before she leaves, and this old man walks in. It's like one of those old printer guys, you know, with the printer's ink thing on, and he's probably already next to retirement anyway. And he's like, well, you know, I'm coming to get your article because I'm going to go do the last print for my entire career, probably, right? And she's thinking, oh, man, you know, screw that article, basically, right? So she does something that I guess is something that it's been done before. It's really strange. It's 1941, so you and I don't have necessarily what we might call a ringer, something that's going to work to make something take place. But she knows this old trick. So we see her get to her typewriter, and it's probably one of the only times I've ever seen an actress or actor type on a typewriter, the old-fashioned kind, and she just kills this thing. I mean, she must type like 120 words per minute. It's just tremendous. Whether it's accurate or not, I don't know. But she comes up with a new idea. She whips out this article, and it kind of montages some fades to give you a sense that time has passed. So she doesn't just write it instantaneously, but it's pretty quick. And she pulls the article out of her typewriter and hands it to the printer guy, and he's like, oh my gosh. They call it a name. I forgot what it's called, but it's one of those things. He's like, this is the old trickaroo. She's, yep, print it. He's like, yeah, well, why not? You know, I'm getting fired today. This is just brilliant. The letter, well, the article that she writes is not the article she's supposed to write. She pretends like someone wrote a letter into the newspaper and basically said that he can't stand the world anymore, that everyone's just disenfranchised, it's just crappy, and he is going to jump off of City Hall on Christmas Eve. And it's all fake. She made it up, but they print it. And she's got to go home, right? She doesn't work there anymore. And of course, this thing gets in the newspaper, distributes all over this major city, and the city goes crazy over this letter. Oh my God. This person is going to jump off City Hall on Christmas Eve because they hate the world. And of course, everybody in this time frame is coming out of the Depression. And you have to remember, this movie was released in 1941, so it was definitely made before Pearl Harbor. However, there's one mention of Mein Kampf in here. So the tension is building in Europe, right? Things have happened in Europe. Hitler's already moving and shaking and doing stuff, right? But just like World War I at the time, we weren't moving in immediately to intervene, which is why Pearl Harbor was put together, right? So as soon as this hits, Connell's like, what the hell is this? Who's the John Doe? We have to know. And so they pull her in the next day because there's now sort of a APB, right? It's like, hey, all counts bulletin. And they're trying to find the John Doe because they don't want him to kill himself, right? But it's not real. So she comes in the next day and she's not playing around. Connell's like, we got to find this guy. What do you know about him? She's like, he's not real. And he's like, what? You printed in my newspaper a fake suicide attempt. The guy doesn't even exist? Nope. How many papers did you sell last night? How many papers are you going to sell today? She says, this is what a budding newspaper that just had to lay off a ton of people. I mean, it's not budding, but it's a new purchase. And Connell's running the show. She's basically saying, we're going to sell hundreds and hundreds and thousands of newspapers on this one thing. Go with it. And he's like, no way. I get caught doing this, we're done. Just about that time, it flips over to the Chronicle, another newspaper, which is the competitor to this one. And you see them talking about, oh my God, this has got to be fake. They are doing this simply to sell papers. Of course, the dude's right. But now they print a little paper, a little extra paper, and it goes out and accuses the other paper of being a fake. Uh-oh. So now Connell's going, oh my God, I got you writing a fake letter, which went out. Everybody wants to find this guy to keep him from jumping off a roof, and the competitor's accusing me of lying. So now I'm already screwed, just right away. I'm completely screwed. She's like, you're not screwed. We just have to find a John Doe. He's like, what? She's like, yeah, we just have to find a John Doe. He said, what the hell are you talking about? And she's like, there's plenty of guys out there starving to death. We'll find someone that will assume this role, and then we'll save the day. It'll be all a big positive story. Well, I don't know how many of you know this, but hobos were a big deal for a long time in the Midwest. I mean, there were hobos when I was a kid in the 70s, okay? Basically guys that live on trains. It became a problem at one point where, train companies had to chase these guys off their cars, right? Sometimes they get killed and grind up in a hamburger, but a lot of times they're just stealing stuff off the trains because they don't need money. Getting free rides, right? Well, they look out the window of this office, and there's a big glass window facing the sort of the outer area, just like you've seen 100 times. And there's a bunch of hobos out there waiting. They're all John Doe. They're all pretending to be John Doe. And so she's like, don't worry, Connell, I'll handle it. We just got to find the right guy with the right face and the right attitude to be the John Doe. So very quickly, they rattle through a few of the folks until Gary Cooper walks in. Now, John Doe is, his name's John in real life. I mean, in the script, I should say. And he has a buddy played by Walter Brennan who's called the Colonel, which is kind of funny. They're both hobos. They run together. Well, Connell is just trying to get to the end of this situation where Christmas Eve goes by and the guy doesn't jump and it's all okay. So he's trying to clean up the mess that Anne created. And they will sell a ton of newspapers. But Gary Cooper plays this meek man who is just defeated by the Depression. He's probably, technically speaking, in his mid to late 30s. And he comes in with this kind of weird situation. So he's willing to be John Doe because he's looking for money. And the Colonel's kind of like, man, I don't like any of this. You're getting into a system. When we become hobos, we leave the system. He goes, the second you own something, he goes, they got you. You buy a house, they got you for the mortgage. They got you for the taxes. They got you for everything. You buy a car, you got to pay more on the car. All this other stuff. He's just illustrating the trap of really getting involved with anything. He goes, a lady. He goes, oh, give me a break. A woman, this is the worst thing you can ever get involved in, right? Now, he's going to remain an island the entire film with his little attitude. But John needs money. John kind of accepts the idea of being the John Doe, but then he collapses because he is so hungry he can't stand up anymore. And the next scene we see, they're feeding him all kinds of food. And he's gone through like 4 entrees and he's just pushing it all down, right? Well, immediately they want to, because the mayor's involved, it's like you can't be jumping off a building on Christmas Eve. It looked bad for everybody, right? And of course the Chronicle's like, they're faking it. So they grab up John and the Colonel and they stick him in a palatial suite downtown in a hotel. They get him a good suit. But there's a deal they have to strike first. This is where we find this weird little subplot. The subplot is that John used to be sort of a minor league pitcher, but he was on his way to being a major league pitcher. And the day that he got scouted, the day that he pitched a great game, and a scout came down with a major league contract, okay? He had chipped a bone in his elbow, and so he blew out his arm. And he couldn't raise his hand to sign the contract, and so he couldn't even fake it. So his dream has been to raise the money to fix his elbow, thinking he's going to get back in the major leagues. And the interesting about it is, if you know anything about baseball, yes, they used to play a lot longer back in those days, but he is definitely visibly past any competitive baseball career. But they don't crap on his parade. They just, okay, great. So they promise him $1,000 at Christmas Eve as long as he passes that time and obviously doesn't jump off. Well, he didn't write the letter in the first place, but he has to stay in the character for that long, and they'll give him money. And of course, in his mind, being a hobo, $1,000 will do all kinds of stuff. And you have to understand that, like, it's probably about anywhere from 12 to 15 times that amount of money in today's cash. So Anne, being Barbara Stanwyck, is just an amazing tour de force. She is the leader by design, okay? And he actually, there's some pretty endearing scenes that which you can just watch the movie and see, but this John guy is a really sweet man. And the Colonel is kind of an old cantankerous fart, okay? But he's having dreams about fixing his arm and stuff, and he's fed now. He looks fantastic. They have a little posse around him as well. There's a little character named Beanie that runs around. He works for the Colonel at the newspaper, or Connell, at the newspaper. And he's always around. And these guys are kind of all dopey, Only the Colonel, Walter Brennan's character's kind of got some wisdom about him, but he's jaded. He's so jaded. And these characters have been put into the script so you can hear their voice, so that everyone watching this movie's got their voice represented, right? But what they have is a plan. And the plan is to have John Doe do a speech on the radio, also in front of a live audience, and just basically diffuse the situation, but maybe do something interesting, right? Now, Anne is a gifted writer to begin with. Her father's passed away. She lives with her mother. Very nice home. And she's trying to figure out, she's been tasked with writing the speech, and so she's trying to figure out what the hell to say. And she just can't figure out anything that really clicks with her. And one night, she's with her mother, and her mother said, "You know what? Your father was a great man. I'm sorry he's not here to help you right now, but maybe he can." And she goes off into a room, and she pulls out a diary. And she says, "This is your father's diary." And Anne's like, "I didn't know he had a diary." She's like, "Well, there's probably something in there that could help you write the speech for John Doe, because you know what? Your father was kind of a John Doe." And so this thing attaches like, what? Like John Doe is more than just a guy that wrote a letter? And this epiphany starts inside Anne, which is like, you're right. Like a John Doe is what we call John the Plumber now, right? Or Joe the Plumber, excuse me. It's the political analogy when you want to talk about the average man, which is most of us, right? And so she sets off and starts writing this speech, which I'm going to read to you. You know, John is up in his suite with the colonel and with two goofy guys who are supposed to take care of him and they're playing this funny little mock game of baseball. They don't have a ball. They're just swinging, and they're all pretending the ball's in the room. It's a very cute scene. I'll just let you see that. But one of these dudes from the Chronicle sneaks into the room during a shift of the guys. And he takes the place of, like, I think maybe Beanie or somebody. And he's looking at John, and he's like, well, you know, I don't know how much you're getting paid to do this, kid, but I'll give you $5,000 if you read our speech. $5,000? That's 5 times as much. Remember, I told you it's at least 10 times the amount. A little bit over 10 times for sure. Remember, $50 on What's My Line in 1955 was worth $550, our money. So now he's looking at $50,000 to $60,000, and he's like, oh my gosh, that would buy a whole lot of elbow fixing, plus a lot of other trimmings, right? He says, you can't keep this up forever, right? You're a fake, right? You're a ringer. You just, like, you don't want to do this forever. You're going to get caught. It's going to be embarrassing. So why not just, when you go up to do your speech tonight, read our speech. I'll give the colonel the $5,000, and you'll see it all happen all at once, and you read the speech, so you know you have your cash. We're not going to give it to you, until then. And so he's kind of like, yeah, you're right. You know, this is huge. I mean, imagine a hobo like getting all this press and all this pressure on him to be something he's not, and speaking on a microphone in general is freaking him out. Just the concept of it, right? So now John's torn. He's got a choice to make, right? Remember, a hero in a movie is someone who has to make a decision under pressure. It shows you who they are as a human being. So he goes to this amazing event. It's, I think it's Studio A or B inside the NBC soundstage in New York. Everybody is dressed up. This place looks amazing. It's all Art Deco. It's just beautiful. And of course, he comes in with his suit. He's got the bailout letter up here in his right chest pocket, and they've got the speech that they want him to read right in front of him on the podium. It's a beautiful mic, and Anne comes up to him and grabs him and says, look, man, this speech is the best thing I've ever done. It's modeled after a lot of thoughts my father had. And she goes, just read it. It'll be fantastic. And there's a few like technical difficulties because they're adding suspense to the movie of like, okay, what's he going to do? What's he going to do? And the Chronicle guy sitting in the audience, and his buddy with the money is sitting over with the colonel by the back door. Now, John looks over, and they do the exchange of money, but they're still standing next to each other because he hasn't read the speech yet. And the colonel had made an analogy earlier in the film, like, we should just go. We should just leave. You shouldn't make a speech. We should just bug out right now. We know how to survive by ourselves. He's like, nah, come on. I'll get my elbow fixed. The whole world will be better. And so there's this beautiful door that leads outside. And the colonel just, every time he looks at him, the colonel's just pushing on the door. We can go anytime you want, man. Right here is the door. So this is the speech that John gives in front of a whole audience, being broadcast, live on the radio. He's nervous. So some of this dialogue, I'm supposed to read it, and if I'm to do it any justice, that he is kind of nervous and messing up a little bit at first. But he goes up there and he doesn't want to do this. And of course the subplot's there that he's got this other letter in his pocket that this Chronicle newspaper wrote for him that says, we'll pay you $5,000. You can fix your elbow so you get back to baseball. Just read our version of it. It says that you're a fake. So he's up there and he is thinking it through. But Anne, she has appealed to him at the last second. She tells him how special this speech is and how she wrote it based on her father's diary, right? So John walks up to the mic. He doesn't understand how it works. Gets too close initially. And he says, ladies and gentlemen, I'm the man you all know as John Doe. I took that name because it seems to describe the average man, and that's me. And he's like, that's me. He says, well, it was me before I said I was going to jump off the City Hall roof at midnight on Christmas Eve. Now, I guess I'm not average anymore. Now I'm getting all sorts of attention from big shots, too. The mayor and the governor, for instance. They don't like those articles I've been writing. People like the governor and that fella that can stop worrying. I'm not going to talk about them. I'm going to talk about us, the average guys, the John Does. If anybody should ask you what the average John Doe is like, you couldn't tell him because he's 1,000,001 things. He's Mr. Big and Mr. Small. He's simple and he's wise. He's inherently honest, but he's got a streak of larceny, in his heart. He seldom walks up to a public telephone without shoving his finger into the slot to see if somebody left a nickel behind. He's the man the ads are written for. He's the fellow everybody sells things to. He's Joe Dokes. He's the world's greatest stooge and the world's greatest strength. Yes, sir, we're a great family, the John Does. We're the meek who are supposed to inherit the earth. You'll find us everywhere. We raise the crops, we dig the mines, work the factories, keep the books, fly the planes, and drive the buses. And when a cop yells, "Stand back there, you," he means us, the John Does. We've existed since time began. We built the pyramids. We saw Christ crucified, pulled the cars for the Roman emperors, sailed the boats for Columbus, retreated from Moscow with Napoleon, and froze with Washington at Valley Forge. Yes, sir. We've been in there dodging left hooks since before history began to walk. In our struggle for freedom, we've hit the canvas many a time, but we always bounced back. They've started a lot of talk about free people going soft, that we can't take it. That's a lot of hooey. A free people could beat the world at any time, from war to tiddlywinks, if we all pull in the same direction. I know what a lot of you are saying. What can I do? I'm just a little punk. I don't count. Well, you're dead wrong. The little punks have always counted because in the long run, the character of this country is the sum total of the character of its little punks. But we've all got to get in there and pitch. We can't win the old ball game unless we have teamwork. And that's where every John Doe comes in. It's up to him to get together with his teammates. And your teammates, my friends, is the guy next door to you. Your neighbor. He's a terribly important guy. That guy next door. You're going to need him, and he's going to need you. So look him up. If he's sick, call on him. If he's hungry, feed him. If he's out of a job, find him one. To most of you, your neighbor is a stranger, a guy with a barking dog and a high fence around him. Now, you can't be a stranger to a guy that's on your team. So tear down that fence that separates you. Tear down the fence, and you'll tear down a lot of hates and prejudices. Tear down all the fences in the country, and you'll really have teamwork. I know a lot of you are saying to yourselves, he's asking for a miracle to happen. He's expecting people to change all of a sudden. Well, you're wrong. It's no miracle. It's no miracle because I see it happen once every year. And so do you. At Christmas time. There's something swell about the spirit of Christmas. To see what it does to people. All kinds of people. Like, why can't that spirit, that same warm Christmas spirit, last the whole year round? Gosh, if it ever did, if each and every John Doe would make that spirit last 365 days out of the year, we develop such a strength, we create such a tidal wave of goodwill that no human force could stand against it. Yes, sir, my friends, the meek can only inherit the earth when the John Does start loving their neighbors. You better start right now. Don't wait till the game is called on account of darkness. Wake up, John Doe. You're the hope of the world. So, now that you've heard the speech, one of the things that took place was that I didn't want to interrupt the speech, but the colonel gives back the money because he didn't read the speech bailing out. The guy goes over to the Chronicle guy, the big dude, and he's pissed. He's pissed he got double-crossed. And so now John's like, oh my God, I'm in the middle of this crazy thing. The audience roars and loves this whole speech he gave, but he feels like a heel because he's lying. He's not a guy that lies, right? And the colonel's like pushing on that door. Sure enough, boom, John takes off with the colonel. So he disappears from the public. And of course, everybody wants him, and the newspapers are the ones that are benefiting from this, especially the Connell's paper, excuse me. And of course, the Chronicle's trying to make a mockery out of the whole thing. So the Colonel and John, they need to eat. It's the next day, and they find a little diner in this little town on the outskirts of, I guess, New York. And they walk in the diner, and they sit down, and he says, you know how much money we got? And he says, you got 4 bits, man. He says, what do we get? We get donuts? He says, yep. And so this waiter comes over to them, and he's actually the actor that ended up doing a ton of Disney voices, including Winnie the Pooh. And he's like, what do you guys want? And they order this big extravagant steak dinner. And of course, he's looking at him like, you're 2 hobos, right? And he's like, so you want donuts, right? And he's like, yeah, we want donuts, right? So he's about to tell his mother, who's the chef, that, bring out a couple donuts. And he happens to turn around. The newspaper's right there. And it has the John Doe picture right there of the guy sitting at the bar, right? At the counter of the diner. And he looks over and he's like, oh my gosh. He goes, you're that guy. He's like, no, I'm not that guy. I'm just a likeness. I look like him. He's like, no. I know a face when I see one. He goes, hey, everybody. He goes, Mom, everybody, we got John Doe here. And of course, they freak out because he just blew their socks off with this speech. So the girl's like, let's get out of here, man. And they try to escape. And right away, the whole town kind of swarms him. And he ends up at the mayor's office. And of course, Connell's like en route because he's like, oh my God, we found him, right? So Ann comes, Connell comes, probably Beanie comes, but the mayor's there, right? And the mayor's trying to do something to make his town look good, right? We found John Doe, man. Seemingly the whole planet that heard this speech is worried about John. Of course, he's also been associated with the letter that says he's going to jump off a roof, and now he's run away. So they just think, oh my God, he's gonna jump again, right? Well, he doesn't want to have anything to do with it. And he's telling Ann, I don't want to have anything to do with this. I'm out. Keep your money. And she's kind of like, man, you can't. This got really big. And that's when the guy named Bert, it comes into the room, and the mayor says, well, before you leave, I want you to hear from one of our citizens here. And it's a group of about 15 people, it's packed really tightly. But the front guy is a soda jerk, right, at the local drugstore. And he's just this humble man, you know, and he's got his wife behind him and a bunch of people. I'm going to read you the speech that Bert said. So Bert comes up and talks to him. And this is what Bert says. He says, my name's Bert Hansen, Mr. Doe. I'm the head soda jerker at Schwarzbacher's drugstore. He says, well, sir, you see, me and my wife, we heard your broadcast and got quite a bang out of it, especially my wife. Kept me up half the night saying, that man's right, honey. The trouble with the world is nobody gives a hoot about his neighbor. And that's why everybody in this town's sore and cranky at each other. Well, that's fine, but how's a guy going to go around loving the neighbors that we've got? Our sourpuss, for instance. You see, Sourpuss Smithers is the guy who lives all alone next door to us. He's a cranky old man and runs a secondhand furniture store. We haven't spoken to him for years. I always figured he was an ornery old gent that hated the world because he was always slamming his garage door and playing his radio so loud it kept us up half the night. Well, anyway, the next morning I'm out watering the lawn and I look over and there's Sourpuss on the other side of the hedge, straightening out a dent in his fender. And, well, my wife yells at me out the window. She says, go on, speak to him, Bert. And I figured, well, heck, I can't lose anything, so I yelled over at him, good morning, Mr. Smithers. He went right on pounding on his fender, and I was burned. So I turned around to give my wife a dirty look, and she said, louder, louder, he didn't hear you. So in a voice you could have heard in the next county, I yelled, good morning, Mr. Smithers. Well, sir, you could have knocked me over with a feather. Old Sourpuss turned around, surprised-like, and put on a big smile, came over and took my hand like an old lodge member. He said, good morning, Hansen. I've been wanting to talk to you for years, only I thought you didn't like me. And then he started chatting away like a happy little kid, and he got so excited, his eyes began watering up. Well, Mr. Doe, before we got through, I found out Smithers is a swell egg, only he's pretty deaf, and that counts for all the noises. And he says it's a shame how little we know about our neighbors. And then he got an idea, and he said, how's about inviting everybody someplace where we can all get together and know each other a little better? Well, I'm feeling so good at this time, I'm ripe for anything. So Smithers goes around the neighborhood inviting everybody to a meeting at the schoolhouse, and I tell you, everybody that comes in the store, including Mr. Schwabacher, my boss, I'll be doggone if over 40 people don't show up. And his wife says, tell him about making Sourpuss chairman, honey. Oh, yeah. We made Sourpuss chairman and decided to call ourselves the John Doe Club and say, incidentally, this is my wife. Come here, honey. This is my wife, Mr. Doe. And she's just so tickled to meet him, you know. He goes, this here's Sourpuss. Oh, excuse me, Mr. Smithers, Mr. Doe. And Sourpuss comes over. He says, that's all right. If you didn't call me Sourpuss, it wouldn't feel natural. Well, anyway, I guess nearly everybody in the neighborhood came except Delaney's. The Delaney's live in a big house with an iron fence around it, and they always keep their blinds drawn. And we always figured that they was just an old miser and sat back counting his money. So why bother about inviting him? Until Grimes, the milkman, spoke up and said, say, you've got the Delaney's all wrong. And then he tells us about how they canceled their milk last week and how when he found a note in the bottle, he got kind of curious, and he sort of peeked in under the blinds and found the house empty. If you ask me, he said, they're starving. Old man Delaney's been bringing his furniture over to my place at night, one piece at a time, and selling it. And then Burke continues, yeah, well, sir, A half a dozen of us ran over there to fetch them, and we got them to the meeting. What a reception they got. Well, everyone shook hands and then made a fuss over them. And, well, finally, Mr. and Mrs. Delaney just sat right down and cried, Sourpuss says. And then we started to find out about a lot of other people. And Bert says, you know Grumble, for instance. So he starts pointing at this dude who's just standing in the crowd, and he says, yeah, that's him, of course. You don't know Grumble, but he's a man that everyone figured was the worst dough count in the neighborhood because he was living like a hermit and nobody had anything to do with him. Or that's until Murphy, the postman, told us the truth. Why, Grumble, he says, he lives out of garbage cans because he won't take charity, because it would ruin his self-respect, he says. Well, sir, about a dozen families got together and gave Grumble a job watering their lawns. Isn't that wonderful? And then we found jobs for 6 other people, and they've all gone off relief. My boss, Mr. Schwabacher, made a job in his warehouse for old man Delaney. Well, you know, the reason why we wanted to tell you this, Mr. Doe, was to give you the idea that what you started. And from where I'm sitting, I don't see any sense in you jumping off any building. And the group's all, no, of course, you know. And then Bert finishes with, well, thank you for listening. Goodbye, Mr. Doe. You're a wonderful man. It strikes me you can be mighty useful walking around for a while. Perfect, right? So after hearing Bert talk, and after Bert tells him he's a wonderful man, and, you know, we could really use you walking around for a little while, which means don't do anything to yourself, man. And that's usually the case for most people that are feeling depressed, right? We need to let them know. I have a whole episode on suicide. You should go check if that's something that's in your mind, either for yourself or for other people. It's way back in season 1. Just go to the website, deepthoughtsradio.com. Just look up the word suicide. John's not suicidal. He's being associated with something. But when he sees the effect he has had on society in this little tiny town, that speech that Ann wrote was great. And he agrees with the speech. He agrees with what she said. He is the John Doe, an average man who's struggling now because he blew out his elbow. He's hopping trains, right? He agrees to rejoin the movement. And that's when we are introduced to a new man who owns the paper, D.B. Horton. The casting on this is ridiculous. I mean, it's just everyone is perfect and everyone has a chance to be their character. A lot of movies will hire great actors, they do cameos, but they don't get enough script time or screen time to really show you their craft. And this movie does it. This movie's 2 hours and 2 minutes long, and it will just fly by. And you'll be so glad it went longer. You know, it's not one of those movies you're in the middle going, oh my gosh, checking your watch. It'll be completely opposite. But the John Doe Club thing explodes. And this D.B. Norton guy, which we just call D.B., he is a true enterpriser, and he knows everybody. He knows labor union guys. He knows senators. He knows everybody. And there's a speech he gives to his people where he's got a map of the United States behind him. And they put little flags into the map every place where a little chapter starts of the John Doe Club. And already there's a lot of them in virtually every state on the main continent, right? And so they put a lot of money in to push this John Doe thing. And it's selling the crap out of papers, of course. So that's what we're thinking is DB's goal, because he sells papers, right? And suddenly the flag density just probably, I would say, 10x's on this thing. I mean, every single county's got a John Doe Club, and the world is becoming a better place, right? Well, after it hits a critical mass, this DB guy says, look, we're going to have a big thing in New York. You're going to get the biggest venue, tens of thousands of people. I think it's 30,000 people. And, you know, up until that point, John Doe's been on a train just going all over the place, stomping and talking and building up this whole thing. And it's just making the world a better place. It's really cool. At the same time, he's without a woman, right? And he's sort of fallen in love with Anne. but it's the most endearing, subtle, falling in love arc in a character I have seen in my lifetime. It's so amazing. And Gary Cooper, the range on this guy, I had heard his name my whole life. I don't think I've ever seen a movie with him in it that I knew. But his change of demeanor is just unbelievable, I have to say. But he's getting really close to maybe trying to pop a question. But he is an extremely meek man. He is a man, but he's just been beaten down by the depression, right? So there's some endearing scenes. I'm going to let you see that. There's some endearing scenes where he gets close to her and he's trying to get her to this certain threshold of thinking about them together. And he actually goes and talks to her mother, and that scene's phenomenal. But staying on course with the script, they're building up this huge event. It's another one of these events where they're going to have them do a gigantic speech and move things. But just before that event takes place, they push the camera inside D.B. Norton's palatial mansion. And he has assembled a group of very powerful men, like a Jekyll Island kind of group of guys, right? But just prior to that meeting really taking place, Anne gets pulled in, and she's like, "Oh, it's I hope you don't mind. I'm a little early." And he says, "No, it's fine." And they give her a mink coat, and she just, "Oh my gosh, that's amazing, a mink coat." And he goes, "Well, I got another gift for you here." And she opens up this bracelet box, right? Those long ones, right? And it's just this encrusted diamond, amazing thing. And she's looking at him like, like, do I still get a promotion? Like, are you buying me off so I don't get any money off this stuff, off my achievements? And he says, he goes, "Don't worry." He goes, "You'll have a place in this organization for a long time. In fact, things are changing. I need you to write a speech. I need you to write the speech tonight, but I'm going to tell you what you're going to put in that speech, because we're about to change America." This D.B. Norton guy has a plan. He's going to leverage the loyalty of the people to this John Doe character and have him deliver a speech where he tells all of them that they're going to create a third political party. Because this is 1941, right? You got Democrats and Republicans, that's it. We're going to create a third party. And he's going to tell them, this is what DB's telling her, that he has already selected the best candidate to be the president of the United States within this new party, the John Doe party, basically. And of course, she looks at him and goes, "Oh my God, you want to be the president of the United States, don't you?" He goes, "You're damn right I do." He goes, "These people need guidance. We've got to clamp down on all this stuff. We got to fix society." He's got all these sort of dictatorial plans for how to fix everything, right? But the rule about the John Doe Club, which was invented by the Burt character, was that you can't be in a John Doe Club if you're a politician. Brilliant. So the mayor couldn't be a part of the John Doe Club with the soda jerk, the first guy that did this thing. Brilliant little distinction there. So how the hell is this going to work, right? So she is obviously destroyed, that she's going to have to cross this ethics barrier. But quite frankly, her character crossed that to start this whole thing in the first place. So, like usual, John Doe, he's up in a palatial suite. They just take care of him constantly. Velvet glove treatment. He comes downstairs because he's preparing to get to the venue to give his speech. And Connell intercepts him. There's a bunch of guys downstairs, and he's like, "You come with me right now." And of course, John's like, "I got to go to the venue." And he's like, "You got plenty of time. Trust me. You're not going to miss your speech. But I want to talk to you." He goes, there's a drink hole right here, 30 feet away. You're good. So he takes him into this drink hole, and Connell has had some drinks. He's a little bit on the drunk side, but just barely. And you have to know that if you've ever been intoxicated in your lifetime, people kind of have looser tongues when they're a little intoxicated. It's a brilliant little twist And it's this little quaint place. And nobody else is there except for the bartender and Connell, plus this dude named Beanie. Now I'm going to read you what Connell says to John, because it's got a lot of wisdom in it. Here we go. So Connell has a conversation with John that's phenomenal. The wisdom in this conversation is ridiculous, okay? So I want to read it to you. So now Connell's kind of drunk, and the actor playing this does a great drunk. He's just ever so slightly a little drunk. I'm not going to attempt to do that, but he goes, "Hiya, John. John, I want to have a little talk with you." So he says, "Tell me." He said, "Did you read the speech that you're going to make tonight?" And of course, John's like, "No, I never read the speeches beforehand, you know." He says, "Uh-huh. That's exactly what I thought. Beanie?" He talks to his assistant. He goes, "Beanie, go down to my office and tell Pop to give you the speech. There's a copy on my desk." And so this dude, Beanie, just runs off. Then the colonel turns back to John. He says, "You're a nice guy, John. I like you. You're gentle. I like gentle people. Me? I'm hard, and tough. I got no use for hard people. Got to be gentle to suit me, like you, for instance. Yep, I'm hard. But you want to know something? I've got a weakness. You'd never guess that, would you? Well, I have. You want to know what it is? The Star-Spangled Banner. Screwy, huh? Well, maybe it is, but play the Star-Spangled Banner, and I'm a sucker for it. It always gets me right here. You know what I mean?" He says, "You aren't old enough for the First World War, are you?" Of course not. Must have been a kid, because I was. I was just ripe and roaring to go. You know what my old man did when I joined up? He joined up too. Got to be a sergeant. That's a kick for you. We're in the same outfit. Funny, huh? He takes a sip on this drink and he's like, "He was killed, John. I saw him get it. I was right there and saw it with my own eyes. Me? I came out without a scratch, except for my ulcers. Should be drinking milk. The stuff is poison." He looks at his drink and he orders more drinks from the bartender. He says, "Yes, sir, I'm a sucker for this country. I'm a sucker for the Star-Spangled Banner, and I'm a sucker for this country. I like what we got here. I like it. A guy can say what he wants and do what he wants without having a bayonet shoved in his belly. Now that's all right, isn't it?" John's like, "You betcha. It's all right. And we don't want anyone coming around changing it, do we?" "No, sir." "No, sir," Connell says. "And when they do, I get mad. I get boiling mad. And right now, John, I'm sizzling. I get mad for a lot of other guys besides myself. I get mad for a guy named Washington, a guy named Jefferson, and Lincoln. Lighthouses, John. Lighthouses in a foggy world, you know what I mean?" "Yeah, you bet," John said. He's, "Listen, pal, this fifth column stuff is pretty rotten, isn't it?" He says, "Yes, it certainly is. And you'd feel like an awful sucker if you found yourself marching right down the middle of it, wouldn't you? And you, of course, you wouldn't know it because you're gentle. But that's what you're doing. You're mixed up with the skunk, my boy. A no-good, dangerous skunk." Of course, John's like, "Say, you're not talking about Mr. Norton, D.B. Norton, you know?" And Connell's like, "Well, I'm not talking about his grandfather's pet poodle." He goes, "You must be wrong, Mr. Connell, because he's been marvelous about the John Doe clubs." He says, "Yeah? Say, you're sold on the John Doe idea, aren't you?" He says, "Sure. Sure, I don't blame you. So am I. It's a beautiful miracle. A miracle that can only happen right here in the good old USA. And I think it's terrific. What do you think of that?" "Me? Hard-boiled Connell. And I think it's plenty terrific. All right, now, suppose a certain unmentionable worm whose initials are DB was trying to use that to shove his way into the White House so he could put the screws on, so he could turn out the lights on those white lighthouses. What would you say about that, huh?" Of course, John's like taken back. Nobody's going to do that, Mr. Connell. They can't use the John Doe clubs for politics. That's the main idea. Remember, you can't be a politician and join a John Doe club. Connell's like, is that so? Then what's a big political boss like Hammett doing in town? A labor leader like Bennett? And a lot of those big shots who are up there at DB's house right now. Wolves, John. Wolves waiting to cut up the John Does. Wait till you get a gander at the speech you're going to make tonight. John's like, you're all wet. Miss Mitchell writes those speeches and nobody can make her write that kind of stuff. They can, huh? Connell says. Who do you think writes them? My Aunt Emma? I know she writes them. And get a big bonus for doing them, too. A mink coat and a diamond bracelet. Don't write them? He says, well, that gold-grabbing dame would double-cross her own mother for a handful of Chinese yen. And John gets pissed. He says, shut up, you're drunk. That's when Benny comes back with the speech. And the colonel says, go on, read it, John. And then start socking. So, now John has a copy of this new speech. And he's like, okay, I can't do this speech. So he books over to DB Norton's joint. And DB has been talking to his boys, all these heavy hitters, man, in town that really control the country, control all these jobs. And he walks in, pissed off, and he's got the speech in his hand. And Ann is there. No longer wearing the mink, but she's dressed up for the event. And just like in old movies, this is always the case. The innocent read the riot act to the guilty when they don't have a gun and they don't have anything to defend themselves. And you could just sense it's going to end badly for this particular scene. And he tells Norton, he goes, you can't be involved with this, and this event, this whole movement can't be involved with a political affiliation. That's the rules. And of course, DB's like, kid, you don't even know what's going on. Like, who the hell are you? You're a fake, pretending to be this character. I paid for the John Doe movement. I paid for the promotion. This whole thing is mine. It's physically mine. I paid for it. Do you think I paid for this so that you could be famous? So that you would have more control? No, I paid for it because I want to put myself in power. And he says, well, I'm just going to go down to the venue and I'm going to tell him the truth. And that's when DB goes into contingency mode. He says, you do that and I'll destroy you. I will utter, he goes, everything's been set up in case you go that route. He says, screw you, I'm taking off. So it's a little difficult for him to get out. They try to stop him physically and he manages to escape. So we're kind of like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? You know, they show the venue and it's raining outside and it's at night. This is a very dreamy setting and sequence. Everyone's got black umbrellas too. There's a big central stage with a mic and a band and everybody who's anybody's there. And of course, there's just tons of people and they're all like, John Doe, John Doe. And he finally arrives there, pushes in, and he is trying to get up on the stage. And the director and the writers did this amazing job of delaying him by having things happen that have to take place before he's allowed to do his speech. It's all part of the schedule. So he's standing up there going, no, I got a limited amount of time here because they're coming after me. Somehow they're coming after me. I think I'm going to skip how they block him so you can see it and have that reveal yourself. In fact, I'm going to skip the end of the movie. Needless to say, it's got a great ending. And it's not probably what you would have imagined. Meet John Doe. So why make an episode about this film? Well, doesn't it sound really familiar? Doesn't it sound extremely familiar to today's situation that we think we'll never get out of? Like I said, when you watch old movies, you'll suddenly realize that the patterns that we're living in life as a society, they merely change the mechanisms to divide and conquer us. They change the way that they degrade society. Now, we have been, again, as I've been saying in several episodes, we have been on this gluttonous vector for a really long time, consuming more than we need, right? We buy more than we need. We have more square footage in our homes than we need. We have more cars than we need, because it's medicating that depression of like, well, why don't you get a hobby, man? Why don't you go do something that you love? Let there be silence in your mind once in your life. And as it feels horrible, to the degree that silence in your mind sounds horrible or feels angsty and strange, that's proof that you need the silence in your mind, that you need to rethink, who are you as a person, right? Think about the transformation of this John Doe character. He had a normal life, then the depression hits. He had a shot at the big leagues. Seriously, the fictional character was just about to get recruited into the Major League Baseball situation, and he blew out his arm the day he's supposed to sign this thing. He can't reach up to sign the contract. I mean, what an amazing line in this movie. But he still kept a positive attitude. But when we first meet him, he's so starving, he collapses on the ground. He desperately wants a life where his love is his job, pitching baseball. He ends up falling in love in the middle of this film. And he's ill-equipped because it's very evident he has never been in love before. He doesn't even know how to do it. And you have to remember that men in that era, there's a movie called Penny Serenade is the name of the movie, with Irene Dunne, who's just a fox, and Cary Grant. And there's a similar like stoic nature to the men. Cary Grant never plays a stoic guy, but he mentions it in that movie really well, and it applies to this movie as well. Men just didn't share their emotions. They didn't do anything. So they're trying to deal with what needs to be dealt with in life. And people would simply say, you want to get married? Yeah, sure. I love you. I love you too. Maybe not even say I love you, you know. You just did things because it was time to do those things. And eventually the relationship spawns. The marriage does achieve a loving connection. The journey of John Doe is phenomenal. He's trying to find his way, and he ends up being given a speech which opens up a whole can of worms. Society's upside down. Why was it upside down in 1941? This whole thing is filmed in 1940. The movie was planned in the late 30s, I'm sure. So they are all used to this gigantic depression of all this unemployment. People hurting, man. And so they're all kind of jaded. They're all kind of like, you know? So the speech that was given was applying itself to that era of people. And right now, society's in a sort of pretend you're rich, pretend you have enough money to buy anything, food, stuff. And people are so addicted to their gluttonous habits when they had money that when they don't have money, they don't change their ways, right? And so they just keep getting in debt, right? I wanted to tell you this little tale before potentially the economy goes really, really bad. And you're going to be one person that will have heard this story, and you're not going to be able to buy copies of Meet John Doe and give it out to your neighbors and have them watch it, right? It's the struggle of trying to maintain humanity in the midst of a crisis. And it's a lot more difficult and a lot more subtle than you might think, right? What was the first... if any of you watched Walking Dead from back in the day, first 2 seasons with Shane. Rick and Shane were cops together before this apocalyptic zombie thing happened. And so we watched 2 seasons of this whole thing. And it ends in season 2 with Shane trying to convince Rick, look, man, you're wasting a lot of time and a lot of resources, and you're putting us all at risk because you're trying to approach nomadic people now, people in desperation. People have seen the unseeable, right? I mean, the zombie attacks and all this crazy carnage that's happened. And you're trying to pretend like it never happened because you have this fantasy. The society's going to hang on to humanity as a goal. And we've already been killed. We've already lost people, and we've almost been killed several times because you're trying to make peace with the guy who's got a gun to our head, right? And the best and final fantastic scene of all of The Walking Dead is Rick and Shane fighting in the middle of this field. And Rick ends up killing Shane, a guy who was right. A guy who had absolutely every intention of helping Rick and helping everybody get to the next stage in life through this horrible situation. And Rick finds out every single scene after that finale of season 2 that his buddy was right. And he's got to deal with the fact, oh my God, I killed a man. As a police officer, I killed a man who was right about this horrible situation. So when we talk about things like potentially economy's going really bad and God knows what else, war, as a man at least, you're planning on what you can do, right? Think about it when everything is fine. When everything is fine, you're still challenged by being you. You're still challenged by interacting with society and your job and your future of your job and how old are you and how many years you got left to work and do you have any retirement? All that stuff's just a challenge every single day that you're alive, right? And when you're involved in a depression and it's right now, it's August 3rd, and we're on the brink of like World War III because they've got a really nasty situation in America with a defunct president, an absolutely bone dead, brain dead, candidate on one side, another one that's trying to do everything he can, but he's being blocked by everybody on planet Earth, lying about him 24/7. And we're on the plane, man, right? They're flying the plane, we're on the plane. And like, we know how to fly the plane, but we can't get through that locked cabin door, right? And so planning is going to be a lot more difficult moving forward if they get their way, if they create all this chaos. That could just be a big bluff, right? It could just be a little pop and everything's done, a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but it's kind of over just as fast as it starts. Could be they just want to hold this out till November. Who knows, right? Nobody knows unless you're on the inside, and I am not on the inside. What's really sad about the divide and conquer algorithm that's going on right now is that the divide and conquer stuff that's happening, there's a million divide and conquer things, right? Do you hate this guy? Do you like that person? Is that person being sinful? All this other stuff. It's sort of the anti-John Doe movement. The world is always trying to be this John Doe club. They really are. We're trying to get along with our neighbors. I've had the strangest experiences in my life with my neighbors. It's a weird thing. I grew up in a little small town where everybody knew everybody. Driving down the street would wear you out because you're waving at everybody you pass, because if you don't, you might get somewhere. Only an old lady you don't know is the only one you don't wave to. Then I came to the northern part of Southern California, and they were exactly like my hometown. It was all just a surf community, cool race cars and all this other stuff. And everyone was just wonderful, so I got spoiled to death. And then a recession hit, 1991. I moved to the Bay Area, San Francisco area of South, the Silicon Valley area. I never lived in San Francisco, thank God. But suddenly, my employees, my fellow colleagues, didn't want to hang out after work. I remember the first day at work, I'm staring at this highway called the 92, which is always just jam-packed at 5 o'clock. And there's a 12-mile bridge to get to Fremont. And a bunch of folks who work for us have to go over that bridge to get home. And it's like 5:30 or whatever. We're kind of done. The phones aren't ringing anymore. We're tech support for this big database product. And I suggested, I'm not even a drinker, okay? I suggested we go down to this little restaurant, which has pretty good finger food, and then get a drink of beer or something. I was going to drink a beer just to have some camaraderie, right? Because I was used to that where I came from. I suggested that we do that, and I tell you what, I got 3 or 4 people turn around, look at me like I had just said something impossible that they should do with their head and their ass, right? Unbelievable. And I heard this stupid excuse, well, I've got to drive across the San Mateo Bridge, and we're on a 4th story looking over the bridge. It's just headlights and taillights all the way across. Nothing's moving. I said, what do you mean that? I said, the whole point of me saying is we get to hang out, and that stops. That clears out a little bit, right? You don't got to jump in that and have like a 2-hour, or at least a 1-hour trip across the 12-mile bridge, right? Nope, they weren't having it. And the entire time I lived in the Bay Area, I only knew 2 neighbors, and that was only in the last year of my life there, which was, I had employee friends of mine became best friends of mine, but my neighbors, there was a dude from Georgia, and there was an old 88-year-old woman from North Carolina, I believe, something like that. And I don't know how I met her, but I ended up in her living room talking with her, just digging it, just entertaining an old lady, man. We're just talking, watching TV. Brilliant woman, totally lucid. And my buddy from Georgia, that guy, I ended up eating with his family several times. I only knew him for probably about a year, and he helped me move to Huntington Beach. He drove the truck, man. I had a moving company that failed to show up. Unbelievable. Shamrock Moving Company. What a fraud that joint was. He went and got me workers at a local Home Depot. We loaded up that truck, and then he and I unloaded it together in HB, and I flew him home, took him out to beautiful dinner, and put him up in a real nice hotel in town, and flew him home, gave him a bunch of money for helping me out. But they had to be non-California people, non-Northern California people. Strange. The neighbors I actually went and talked to, they didn't want to have anything to do with communicating with me. Unbelievable. Moved back down to Orange County, or to Orange County for the first time. I'm eating dinner with my neighbor within 3 days. He and his mother. Guy took me all over town. Showed me all the bars, all the restaurants, everything. Yeah, this is good, that's good, this has been there forever, blah, blah, blah. Boom. Knew all my neighbors right away. So the John Doe thing is alive and well in Orange County. It's alive and well in Ventura County. It doesn't exist in the Bay Area. It just doesn't. So that's why when I tell you guys, when you get all googie-eyed for big cities, it's like, I don't understand it. Big cities are never good. They just are kind of abominations of humanity. We're not supposed to be packed that tight. Oh, you might have a nightclub experience and some other experience. Man, I've been to some amazing things, but I visit cities, have my experiences, and I go home. Okay. I'm not afraid of cities. Geez, I walk New York starting at midnight, Never had any problems. Wouldn't be that way today. San Francisco, man, I used to go out at 2:00 to get my food in the morning. No problem. But I wouldn't want to live there. So I don't know. The film has all kinds of implications at the end of it, right? It's sort of, it's one of these situations where you might want to make sure you live in an area where the John Doe algorithm is still alive. Or ask yourself, if you're not in a John Doe area, how in love are you with where you are? Because you deserve that level of humanity. And all it takes is a couple houses on your block. You don't need like the whole world to love you or anything. If you got 3 or 4 houses in your neighborhood, for those of you who got it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You couldn't imagine not having the companionship with, the people that live in your town. You get it. But the amount of people I know that live in big cities that don't know anybody, and they're just, they struggle with the dream dying in their brain that they sold themselves, usually not living in the city, going to the city, get some massive career or something. And even if they're making 7 figures a year, I have seen them crumble and say, I'm getting out of here. If I have to give up all this money and all this crap I don't need, screw this gluttony. I'm going back to this place. I found a new place, da-da-da. And they've never been more happy in their lives than when they escape the pressure cooker that is a city, right? I think that, when society is more relaxed and there's less going on in the world, less fear-mongering in the world, we're all sort of our own little John Doe. And this applies to the ladies as well, right? In that time frame in 41, it wasn't like ladies didn't work. Look at Barbara Stanwyck's character, Anne. She was large and in charge, right? So this whole thing that women didn't work and sit at home in the kitchen, like, give me a break. You need to watch some old movies and figure out how society worked, right? That was extremely rare archetype and people wouldn't be watching movies if what women did in movies wasn't what women did in real life, right? Go watch What's My Line from 1955 to at least 65. It ran for 18 years. And people guessed what the panelists guessed what the job was of the person coming in. It's a funny, fascinating show, and it has all these celebrities on it, like Walt Disney, I think, showed up twice. All these super famous people, and people you don't even know about that were mega famous and either died early or their career just sunsetted, or they were really old when they were on the show. See, the thing is the allure of some of these, and these are fictional films, but again, if you have relatives you've talked to that are, when you were young, if you're my age and you talk to your grandparents, you'll know that these places, this sentiment, these places that are in these fictional movies really existed. We need a target, don't we? We need some sort of archetypal target as to where we go, where are we today, and where do we go? The whole character of the Colonel is a very important character in this film because he's the cynical one. He has taken a philosophy that he probably generated very early in life, and he's just kept to it. And it's not that he's not correct, but what he has created is a sociopathic, psychopathic character, which is, I hate society. Let's just get on a train. I'll have one buddy, and it's you, Mr. John Doe. I'll have one buddy, and you and I just chill out until he finally meets his last day, right? Passes the baton of cynicism to somebody else. What's interesting about the Colonel is when he gives his little speech, which I'll let you see in the film, about how much a man gets tied down by falling, by getting into the mechanism of debt and possessions and love. He's technically correct if you were that terrified of commitment, of obligation. He's really saying a lot about himself, right? What he's really saying is, I can't handle it. And so he wants everyone to be broke like him, broke inside, right? It's like the alcoholic always wants you to be an alcoholic. The drug user wants you to be a drug user. Whatever someone else's thing is that they feel like is defective, their way of dealing with it is trying to make more of those people around them. So they got a posse in which they can turn around, do an about face, point at society and say, we get it, you don't. We're special, you're not. Doesn't that sound really familiar with a lot of the divide and conquer things that are going on in society right now? The problem with that is obviously you're creating eclectic groups that are opposed to more than they accept. And the more perverted and strange they are as a people, no one's ever going to join their group. And it just depends on how they resolve that. They could hurt themselves and exit the universe, or they could end up hurting you. And that's where we get a lot of folks that are homeless right now due to the wonderful management of the economy in the United States. And this is before anything cataclysmic happens to the people that they rely on to give them money. What's the homeless community going to do when everyone's broke, right? Everyone's going to be broke if they get their way. And so who's going to eat what, Anyway, I highly recommend it. It's an old film. It's been colorized on Prime. And it's not bad. The colorization is not bad. It's not hand done. It's like AI done. But they also took the time, I believe, to at least take the 24 frames per second and move it to 30 frames a second. So there's a fluidity of just beauty in this film. A lot of good shots, a lot of good direction. There is the AI for the colorization just in a couple areas. If someone turns their face, like I'm turning to the camera, I'm turning to my right, hiding my right cheek. The right cheek actually vanishes a couple times on people. There's when Gary Cooper actually goes in to talk to Barbara Stanwyck's mother. There's a funny scene where kind of half his face disappears because of the colorizations choosing to match his cheek with the door behind him. And so it kind of vanishes for a split second, but that won't bother you at all. But I want you, if you're a movie buff, and you just like really good, rich characters, and you like to see great acting, the thing I'll hone you in on is pay attention to Gary Cooper's face the entire film, because he is on a absolute emotional roller coaster the entire film. And his face transforms. It's funny, when he smiles and he's all dressed up, he looks a lot like Cary Grant. I just think it's one of the best performances I've seen, because it's a very emotional thing, and there's a lot of films that try to take you on emotional roller coasters, but either the film's premise and story is so out of this world, you're in it to win it, but you're not quite just on the rails and following what the director's trying to do. Virtually everything in this entire script is not competing with reality. It is absolutely possible that everything you see in this film could happen exactly the way the script was written, exactly how it was directed. So I think you're in for a treat. Anyway, I thought I'd throw a little movie one in there. This just moved me so much when I saw it, and I was watching it. Just to give you an example, I randomly picked this film based on a recommendation for another film I watched, and I'm at a different smoke lounge, and I watch about half hour of this film, and I pause it because a friend of mine came in, and we talked for about an hour. Another buddy of mine is on his telephone, younger guy, and he's not interested in this kind of movie, but he's a filmmaker. His father's actually a fairly well-accomplished filmmaker. And so my buddy leaves, and I'm like, okay, I'm playing this thing. You just chill, leave whenever you want. We all have keys to this joint. And for about another 20 minutes, he's in his phone. And then the dialogue starts dropping, man. And I'm just oohing and awing over the direction. This scene with Connell in the bar is just, you got to see how he does it. It's just phenomenal, right? And finally, my buddy he puts down the phone, and he's really tired too. He wanted to leave like just as soon as our buddy left. He wanted to take off as well, but he was finishing something on his phone, and then he starts watching this, and he's probably late 30s, right? And he goes, man, old movies really had a lot of wisdom in them, didn't it? Don't they? And I said, yeah, that's why I watch them. And then about another 15, 20 minutes passes, and he goes, God, man, this is a great movie. He goes, you just randomly picked this movie? He's having a moment too. He's being hit in his late 30s, and he's like, you just picked this movie randomly? Like, he's blown away that I didn't pick it because it was this amazing movie. And I said, yeah, I just, it was on Prime. It's free. In fact, I know it's free because I watched it at a location. I can't buy it. So that's good if you got Prime Video. I'm going to see if I can't get it off archive.org so I can cut some of the frames in. Hope to God I can. Anyway, hope you dig it. Go see it. If you dig old movies, I think you're in for a hoot. It's 2 hours and 2 minutes. Try to make sure no one can interrupt you during that process. I think you can watch it on any device. You'll be happy. But if you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, please go. There's a new store. There's audio if you watch video. There's video if you watch or listen to audio. Season 1 is actually up on a different channel on YouTube, but BitChute and Rumble have the whole thing. At least BitChute has it all. Odyssey also has it. Odyssey's a great player. I'm not sure if they got the whole thing on there, but it's a pretty good player up there. But yeah, BitChute is fantastic. So definitely get up there. To the Patreon, PayPal folks, thank you so much. You make it happen. Take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.